Good morning. Welcome to Friday. It's been a long week, Jocelyn. It's been a generally good week, I think, but there's a lot to talk about and unpack. I am happy it's Friday, mainly because we get to do the show and sort of plot and scheme for next week, which is going to be actually just as long in terms of advocacy. But how about you, Jocelyn? How are you doing today?
I was actually going to say I am very happy to be here with you all, and shout out to our viewers because you all are so wonderful. Like we go back and read the comments, and there's so many insightful things, and it really is exciting to have such a wonderful community, and exciting to have a president who makes lovely speeches about good progressive values. Were you cheered by that, Alex?
Yeah. So um, last week we were talking about how there was a wobble on healthcare, and wobble is definitely a term of art in DC. That it happens. You get indications that Biden's maybe not going to do healthcare, and then it sort of feeds on itself, and then it's like if a story can be told that actually healthcare is not going to happen, then it won't happen. And the power of story and narrative in everything is super important. And in Washington, D.C., it's especially important. And then when you mix that in with the Alex Lawson truism, the number one rule of advocacy that everyone needs to remember, if I could, I'd have it as a neck tattoo right here. And it's always Veep, never House of Cards. When anything is happening in Washington, D.C., it's always Veep. It's just a bumbling comedy of errors, and it's never House of Cards. It's never like, ooh, they're doing this, and it's 52-dimensional. Never. It's always like barely getting things done and nick of time type stuff. But what happens is you have factions who believe certain things, right? Like some people believe that healthcare is too hard to do, that taking on the pharmaceutical industry and big hospital and big insurance, the triad is too hard. And it is hard. So they are coming from like, they have a point, but they're wrong in terms of their analysis of what would happen if we didn't do the hard things and challenge the big triad who hold people's lives hostage for profit. So the wobble was real. It came from last week over into this week. And what you do is you watch the Sunday shows. Jocelyn, I know you know this. The Sunday shows, as stupid as they are, like Chuck Todd is literally one of the dumbest people. Like if you were forced to, you could go back and watch Chuck Todd and like mark it. Okay, he said this. Was he correct? And what you would find is the dude's never right, just across the board, which is almost impressive, right? Like if you're gambling on sports and you have 10 things, it's equally as hard to get all 10 wrong as it is to get all 10 right. So you almost have to give Chuck Todd some credit, but then you remember that dude sucks and you give him no credit. What he's doing and what the Sunday shows do is they try to breathe into existence these narratives that are always to the benefit of the wealthy, of the plutocrats, of the corporations. So we did see that the healthcare wobble did not make it into the Sunday shows, and we were just duking it out over the weekend to get our narrative out there. And it sort of culminated in the Wednesday speech that there's all this, is it going to be in? Is it going to be out? And in a very true DC fashion, it was in, but it wasn't in. And you're like, what does that mean? And it means in Biden's plan, right? It's 15 pages long. The fact sheet is written, right? So black and white ink. And in there, it says we're going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, and we're going to expand Medicare down to age 60, and we're going to expand Medicaid to fill the gap, like written in ink. So it's in the plan, but it's actually weirdly contained in a bullet point that is only tangentially related to those points. So people do say, well, it didn't get like prime placement. And so then we're kind of going through another round of it's not in Jocelyn, it's just in. And I'm literally having to talk to press, and they're like, why isn't it in the plan? And I'm like, it is in the plan. It's right there. It's on page 11 and 12. You can go read it. It's right at the page break. And so then it becomes, is Biden going to say it in the speech? And, you know, we don't have any insight into that. We hope and we listen, but until we got the remarks as prepared for delivery, can I do an aside here? I'm already going on a big tangent of how DC works, but one of the very small but significant changes that only policy wonks remember from Obama is very small, but it's so useful. Obama changed the way speeches were done. You used to actually like only the people who were super clued in, which means generally the people who lack powerful interests, would get speeches as prepared for delivery, like State of the Union, and you sort of like could gauge how important you were and how powerful you were with if you got the speech or not. At some point, Obama's administration changed that, and they just actually send out the speech as prepared for the actual written speech. Made all of our lives so much easier because then you can just read what's going to be in there. And man, did Joe Biden deliver a large section on healthcare, saying, come on, Jack, it's time to take on these high drug prices. He didn't actually say it that way, though. I just really want to get a good Biden imitation. I really want to come up with a good one. And at the end of the day, it was really heartening. There was a lot in that speech, and there's so much in the plan to be happy about. But I was personally extremely happy that taking on pharma, taking on insurance, taking on big hospital, that is definitely in the plan. And then I don't care if it's in or just in. What I know is that we are working with Congress, with both the House and the Senate, every day to actually make these things hit, to write the policy that hits President Biden's desk and he signs it into law. And that's all that matters. So, huzzah.
This is the best House of Cards episode I've ever seen. I'm sorry, Veep. This is the best Veep episode I've ever seen. Also, I am very pro you getting that neck tattoo.
Always Veep, never House of Cards. It's a phrase that will do you so well if you do policy advocacy, especially if you talk to press, because the press are super driven, smart. They're being told a bunch of things from people, and again, everyone's trying to breathe their narrative into existence, which is what we call spin, right? And everyone is spinning their thing, and journalists' job is to like try to cut through that and get to the true truth. And I feel like because of that, they're often creating a House of Cards like infrastructure in their brain to explain all of it, right? And I'm like, no, it's always Veep. Like the reason that thing happened is probably because they couldn't figure out how to attach the PDF in time. Like that's, you know, like there's no message being sent by that. They just literally didn't know how to add the attachment. So that's why that happened. If you work in DC long enough, it just becomes so obvious because people are working extremely hard on this stuff. I don't like the sort of like, you know, oh, they're all lazy. They all, you know, they go on vacation all the time. They don't go on vacation. When they leave Washington, D.C., they actually just go home and campaign, right? That's called the in-district work session. It's like, if you want actually hard workers, the Hill and members of Congress are some of the hardest working people around, for good and for bad, right? Like the evil ones never stop working for evil. That's just what they do. Mitch McConnell wakes up every day and he's like, all right, another 12-hour day of evil. And all of his minions are like, evil, let's do this. Let's extract as much money from these peons as possible. So they're working hard all the time, and they literally don't have time for the House of Cards stuff to pull it off.
Well, I mean, if watching actual House of Cards, it is funny how much time they seem to have. Like, he's
Right.
always with his rowing machine and murdering his mistresses. Like, where is the time in his day for this? There are so many conference calls this man would probably have to be on. Not
Exactly.
realistic at all.
To do one thing in Washington, D.C., you have to. So, like, if you have a thing, okay, we have a briefing right after this show. There's at least like 2 conference calls to planning Zoom, which is to plan the actual thing itself, right? Like, you literally, that's all your day is just all Zooms forever. And sign-on letters. Don't forget sign-on letters.
Well, sign-on letters and Zoom's about sign-on letters. Okay, let's not.
You can't
not
just have a letter.
Right, exactly. Yeah. This was a good. Do you feel happy? You don't seem as happy as I am. Then again, you've been
I'm
doing.
happy. I'm happy. It was a long week. It was a long week, and fighting wobbles is always. So there is a faction. We know there's a faction in Biden land that does not want to do healthcare, and they almost won. I mean, like, you don't end up with the section that is on pages 11 and 12 randomly added into a bullet point because everybody is on board with healthcare. It's because Nancy Pelosi is saying, I'm doing Medicare negotiation. Like, we promised this. We fought it out last Congress. Ron Wyden, Senator Wyden, who's the chair of the Finance Committee, is saying we're going to do Medicare negotiation. We're going to expand Medicare. And at the end of the day, once the White House has said, here is your framework, then they get out of the way. And actually, the work is all done in Congress. And now I'm actually looking forward to this part of the work. This is the stuff that makes a lot of sense. You work with your policy team, and this part makes sense. Trying to influence like what's going to be in the plan and in the speech, that stuff is all very. It's not my favorite part of advocacy, but I'm a total policy head, and the plan. We can go through how they want there to be like, oh, there's the AFP, the American Families Plan, then there's the American Jobs Plan, and then maybe there's a mythical third plan that doesn't have a name, that healthcare. It's all just one thing. I want everyone to hear that really clearly. There's not multiple things. There's one thing, and everything else is just like shiny objects to get you to think that maybe there's something else going on. If your thing is not in the plan that's moving, it's not going to happen. Like, if they're in DC, another truism, I'd run out of neck tattoo space, so maybe it's a face tattoo. But
sleeve.
It's a sleeve, yeah. I'll put it under Cthulhu. Is whatever train is moving. So there are things that are called must pass. So that this thing is actually going to become law. And everyone throws whatever policy they have into the train that's moving. That's what's going to happen with this. We're going to call it, I would wager that at the end of the day, it's going to be called the American Family and Jobs Plan or the American Jobs and Family Plan. And it's all the stuff that could get 50 votes. And then all the stuff that could not get 50 votes in the Senate is going to be thrown into the mythical next plan. And they're going to be like, we want to do that, and we're going to do it in our next plan. And then you'll find they run out of time. And in fact, getting one giant thing across the finish line is super hard. But what they're aiming at is transformative, Jocelyn. Mm-hmm. It's what we've talked about forever here. These are structural changes. $4.4 trillion in structural changes. I mean, just like the obvious, there's so many in there. But one that I think people should get for the magnitude, $80 billion to the IRS, so that the IRS has enough resources that they can actually go after rich people and corporations. Because right now they go after poor people because they know poor people don't have the resources to fight back against them. And so they're like, we would love to go after the Mercers who owe the U.S. government $3 billion in taxes. The Mercers who actually funded and created the infrastructure that led to Steve Bannon and Donald Trump. The IRS says they want that $3 billion, but they would lose if they went up against the Mercers because they don't have enough resources. Like, think of the change there. The IRS now has enough resources to go after rich people and corporations so they don't go after poor people. Poor people who they, maybe honest mistakes or whatever, but like that structural change just changes the whole dynamic of how this country will work. No longer do the rich just get to extract money from everyone else. We're going to change it so that, in fact, I will say, if I skipped over the part, there's enormous tax changes that go after capital gains and other ways that rich people get around paying their fair share. And then $80 billion to make sure that the IRS goes after the rich people and doesn't just let them stash their money away in the Cayman Islands because it's too hard to follow all those shell companies. And that's just one aspect of the plan that was released.
Well, and I think a lot of the people watching the show probably watched the speech because, you're all lovely, engaged people. But it was very exciting. And I think for some historic context, like, this is the first Democratic president who's laid out a positive progressive agenda since what? LBJ? Carter? Like, it's been a long time. Both Clinton and Obama were Democratic presidents whose strategy, and I say that with very severe air quotes, was to work with Republicans and this mythic idea of bipartisanship. Never mind the fact that for decades, Republicans have been essentially an obstructionist party that don't specifically want anything other than to protect the wealthy interests of their friends and otherwise stop all legislation. So Joe Biden, and what I think is a very bold change, an exciting change, is actually coming out and saying, no, this is who we are. This is what our country needs, and we're going to do it. And if you don't like it, that seems like a personal problem. I mean, granted, he wouldn't phrase it that way. He seems to still be using a lot of words like bipartisan, but I'm just going to ignore that. I mean, am I wrong?
No, and the type of bipartisanship that he engages in is, I think, it's the type of bipartisanship that I favor as well, which is these policies are massively popular, bipartisanly popular everywhere in this country except Washington, D.C. And Wall Street. And so when he's talking about bipartisan, it's like, who likes paid family leave? Everybody. So that's bipartisan. So we're going to do that. And if Mitch McConnell doesn't like it because of his paymasters or just because he wakes up to do evil, whatever the reason, like, that's a personal failing of Mitch McConnell's. That doesn't mean that these policies aren't bipartisan. And they're spending time right now, I think too much time, because it's Joe Manchin demanding it, like actually asking for Republican ideas on stuff. And I think the big difference between what Biden is doing and what Obama did is that Obama let this bipartisan, negotiation phase actually drive the whole ship into the dock. And then nothing happened, right? Like, because he actually believed that they were like, in good faith negotiating on the other side of the table. And what we've seen with him so far is that he doesn't let them do that. He listens, but he doesn't let them just drag it out forever in an effort to kill it. Give us your ideas, and if they're good, he'll take them. And if they're not good, or if your whole idea is to just is to drag your feet to try to kill this, then we're going to do it without you and do it partisanly. That is fundamentally the right way to do it, and it would create bipartisanship, right? If the Republicans the sensible Republicans, I don't believe there are many, but maybe they can prove me wrong. There are many out in the country. I just don't think there's many elected ones. If this is the way that things happen, then they won't have the incentive to just do nothing, right? If they know they can't win the hand by dragging their feet long enough that nothing happens, and then they run on, look, nothing happened, and they take back power so that they can give handouts to Wall Street and rich people and billionaires. Biden is saying we're not playing that game. We're playing a different game. And this game is $4.4 trillion of investment in things that are for the people. And we're going to pay for it, the way that we pay for everything, which is just we make the money. But in DC parlance, they say we're going to pay for it by changing the tax system so that millionaires and billionaires are paying their fair share. I've talked a lot, but let's go into that part of it, because I am a MMT explains things, right? That's just the way it is. You don't actually need tax revenue to pay for something. Deficits literally don't matter. If the government is in deficit, that money is going into somebody else's bank account, and it's just, is it going into rich people's bank account or working people's bank account? So when we restructure the tax code, it's not about paying for the things that we're doing. It's about changing it so that the rich aren't siphoning money into their pockets by paying less in taxes than working people.
Well, and that was a moment of the speech that was especially exciting for me. It's wonderful to hear a president say, we're going to make these millionaires and billionaires pay their taxes, because it's really important that people understand you don't need to change anything to just get these people to pay the money that they already owe. The amount of tax fraud that has allowed for our modern hellscape to exist cannot be overstated. I know that the idea of Captain America is probably more exciting than the IRS just doing its job, but unfortunately, that is the situation we're in, because you're absolutely correct, Alex. How many middle and even working class people get audited because that is an easier target than people with billions of dollars in resources? And that's a terrifying situation that I know a lot of people bring up. How unfortunate is it that people making between $20,000 and $100,000 a year, normal incomes, live in more fear of the IRS and pay significantly more of their income into the public cup than people like, I don't know, Donald Trump, Jeff Bezos? These are people who could have their material assets cut in half and they would still be richer than any of us ever will be.
Yes.
Well, I was about to say, not suggesting we seize half of their wealth, but maybe. Do you think that's a viable option?
I mean, I'm a believer in. So if we want to go, there are disappointments in the plan. One of the things is the estate tax was not really highlighted. I'm a huge believer in the estate tax. It's the most fair tax because it's not even a tax on a living person. After a person dies, it's a tax on their estate, which is not the property of anybody's. It's actually the only reason estates exist is because we have a society, a system of laws that allows for property to be passed generation to generation. So in fact, that's the exact moment to tax it. It's super fair. Now, some people would disagree with me on this, but I'm a big proponent of like a 99% estate tax over, let's say, $2 billion. Like, does anyone really think that the children of somebody with billions of dollars is going to like be super disadvantaged if they only get a $2 billion, right? And after that is 99% on the rest of it. To me, so the point of taxes is they're all Pigouvian. All taxes are, you should tax things that you don't want a lot of. And so I don't want a lot of billionaires. I don't want a lot of inequality. We don't need that specific taxes to invest in education. We can just invest in education. That's what we do with a sovereign currency. But what the taxes do is they make it harder for things to exist. So we should have a system where instead of taxing working people's labor very heavily, which is what we do right now with an income tax, compared to rich people's capital gains, we tax that less. Makes no sense at all. The labor of my arm should be taxed way less than some wastrel who's just sitting there with money and it's making money. Money should be taxed way more than labor. And when you change the emphasis there, again, you're not actually needing those tax dollars to invest in stuff, but what you're doing is creating a system that prioritizes certain things like labor. Hard work should be rewarded more than being rich. And right now, it's the exact opposite. The way to be rich in this country is actually to begin rich, right? It's to have the good foresight of being born to rich parents. Capital accumulates capital way faster than labor does. And all of these changes should be aimed at changing that dynamic. So like, okay.
Oh no, what were
Go
you?
ahead.
No. Mine
I was going to bag on Jeff Bezos there. That's all. He can pretend he's going to Mars while he's alive. But as soon as he dies, his estate should be taxed at 99% up to, from 2 billion on. Like, what is that going to hurt? That's going to be awesome. We don't need the next generation to be like, and I will continue to exploit workers so that I can dream about leaving this planet that all of my policies are actively destroying, right? Like, no, we need less billionaires. Let's tax billionaires out of existence because they're literally actively killing all of us. That's the thing.
Well, and I, as always, want to expand this to not more like all culture is political, all political things are cultural. And something I've been thinking a lot about is what does it do to a community? And by community, I mean America. What does it do to our cultural ethos and mythos when the people that are succeeding the most are essentially contributing the least? Right? I was listening to a podcast the other day, and he makes this point. You get on social media, and it's how to be a multimillionaire with these investments, how to become the next tycoon by doing essentially nothing. Like, instead of teaching our children, and not even children, like adults, instead of people aspiring towards great intellectual achievements or artistic achievements or tangible things that make everybody's life better. You think about a great artist or a great thinker or somebody who contributes to medicine by creating a vaccine. That person contributed to everybody's lives they touch. We are much better every time somebody achieves something in medicine. But when somebody creates multi-millions for themselves, nobody else is better, even if they achieve that goal. So when you have millions of people being flooded with the propaganda that the greatest human achievement is to exploit other people, even if they don't achieve that dream, what is that robbing us of as a community? That's depriving us of the things they could have created had they applied their intellectual, spiritual, and psychological energy to other things. And that's sad. I mean, it's a tragedy. There's that quote, and it's like runs around the internet, and it's always misattributed to somebody or another. But I am less interested in Albert Einstein's intellect than I am the fact that people of equal or greater genius were enslaved and exploited and never achieved what they might have. Like, we don't talk about human potential correctly because we are too busy fetishizing wealth. I don't see Jeff Bezos as the pinnacle of human achievement. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Right. Because, he made all of his wealth by not having to pay sales tax because they were like, oh, the internet doesn't exist somewhere, and you're like, he's selling shoes somewhere though. Like that place has roads and water and electrical systems that he is using, so he should pay taxes there. And then like a decade later, they're like, clearly the internet does not exist in an astral plane disconnected from reality, and yes, sales tax exists there. And but by that time he'd already accelerated the destruction of Main Street that Walmart started. And so yes, Jeff Bezos. Let's take 99% of all of his wealth, over $2 billion. That's my big proposal. But it's not just him; it's all of them. I would say also, just there's two things that what you were saying makes me think of. One is that we misattribute who are the plutocrats and the wealthy because we know a handful of names, right? And because they're good villains, right? Like, oh, it's Jeff Bezos and it's Elon Musk, and yeah, those dudes are villains. Elon Musk, all of his money came from a blood-soaked emerald mine in not South Africa. I actually should look up where his the emerald mine was from, but that's where his money came from, right? Zuckerberg, he's rich, and that's how he was able to create Facebook. But even there, those are the names we know, but that's not what it looks like. Like the majority of the rich in this country didn't even use their wealth to create something that people use. Like the majority of the super rich in this country didn't create Facebook or PayPal or anything else. They're actually just rentiers. They're just extracting wealth from people. They own a ton of property that they force people to pay them regular payments on for the privilege of using it as landlords, real estate tycoons, and I could go on of all the industries, but the psychological or cultural, the community destructiveness is actually, and I might not be able to land this one, Jocelyn, so go with me for a second, but it's like we all kind of know the American dream, right? And in our belief, the American dream is that my children will be able to live a better life than me, and their children will be able to live a better life than them. That there is a possibility of upward mobility in America, that through the sweat and the use of our labor, we're able to actually build a better life for ourselves and our families, as opposed to the aristocracy of the quote unquote old world, where you were born into wealth and privilege, and you just maintained that wealth and privilege by virtue of being born rich, right? And then you created all sorts of structures to pretend that it made sense, right? And you talked about blood, noble blood, and things like that. But it was these classes. And in America, the American dream that we all want to believe in is a sort of idea that there's class mobility. But it's not true. That's just not true. It's been studied. There is less mobility in America today than there was before. And there will be less in the future. People are not able to get ahead because of the labor that they put in. People actually can work from the moment they are old enough to work until they die, and still end at lower than they started, because the system is structured just like the old world. It's just we don't call them lords and baroness and whatnot. They are titans of industry or whatnot, but they didn't create anything. They just generally hit the birth jackpot of being born rich. And then I take it to this cultural, you ask about the impact. I think that the modern American dream, unfortunately, is that somebody who's not born rich can, through like exploitative practices, become wealthy by extracting that wealth from other people. So getting a bunch of people to make monthly payments to them for some reason, by being landlords, or by holding their health hostage, or by payday loans with usurious interest rates, and I can name all of them, but they're all exploitative. It's not by building something and then selling that, and the excess, the surplus is your profit, and you build something and you become wealthy that way. The American dream today is corroded. It's rusted. It's gone. First of all, the mobility isn't there, but then at the core of it, it's been replaced with the American dream is that you're smart enough to go to Wall Street, to type on a computer, figure out numbers that exploit millions of people, like homeowners with subprime mortgages, and you extract $2 billion and the world economy blows up. But who cares? Because you've got a golden yacht. Like, that nightmare is what people are aiming for. The best and the brightest are not looking to build community. We've been robbed of community, and it's all been turned into this individualistic, make as much as you can by stepping on whoever you have to. And if you make it to the top, start talking about Mars so you don't have to think about the carnage that you caused here on Earth. And that's not a pretty dream. That's ugly. Really, really ugly.
It's ugly, and I love that you bring up the oldness of this myth, because you're absolutely correct. We may not call them barons, lords, nobility, but they serve the exact same function. And I would argue, with the added psychological violence, that we're told, oh, if you haven't achieved such multi-millions, it's because your attitude is bad. Really, if your attitude was just better, you too would be a multimillionaire. And bypassing the incredibly essential question, should we be rewarding these things with this amount of wealth, regardless of who has the wealth? Our modern incentive structure is, here's how you can make more money, instead of asking, why are people who work 40 to 60, sometimes 80 hours a week doing incredibly essential work, caretaking, making our food, making sure our children are educated, why are those people not financially rewarded with basic abundance? I'm saying basic abundance, like affordable health care, the ability to have dignified housing.
Can I set off the neoliberal alarm on you? On one thing?
Yes, please.
I don't want affordable health care. They propagandize that into our brain. I want guaranteed health care, right?
Oh,
that's
okay.
what you meant. You meant guaranteed health care, but we've been sold this thing for so long that it just permeates in our brain that we're like, I want affordable health care for everyone. No, because it's not a market good. I don't want affordable health care. I want health care for every single person.
We've all internalized it. And this is why, the older I get, the more firmly I believe that the psychological and political thinking we have to break those silos down, because it's all mixed up together. Recently, so I live in Washington, D.C., as most of you know, and recently there was a studio apartment going in my building for like half of what it normally is, right? So obviously I jumped on it, and for 2 months I was like euphoric, like, yes, I have an apartment I can afford. And then of course the euphoria has not subsided. But of course, like, eventually you start to thinking, what world do we live in where I, as a very privileged person, feel lucky to have affordable housing? Like, that shouldn't be a lucky thing. It shouldn't be the baseline for young professionals who, again, I, like a lot of young professionals and very privileged, are paying like a third of their income for their housing. That's not, what does that mean for people who are not highly privileged? Because I have been poor, and guess what? I had 8 roommates. That is the normal state of American 20 and 30 somethings right now. And the fact that we've just sort of casually accepted that is shocking. Our expectations for ourselves have been limited by the political options we're given. And then, you have a situation where, like you said, we're not even asking for that much. We've been gaslit into asking for a basically safe standard of living when we can do better than basically safe.
Yeah, this is not a new insight. I consider myself like pretty radical on the left side, right? The only thing we have to lose are our chains. But at the end of the day, if you look at the policies that I'm pushing, they're like basic stuff in an advanced democracy among our peer nations. Like these are like generally maybe center right things. Like the Tories in the UK are like, oh, well, obviously parking at hospitals should be free at our great NHS. That's a lot. That's an actual issue over there. And over here, we're like, people shouldn't die because they can't afford the bill and they're scared of going bankrupt from going in to get their appendicitis taken care of, right? They're just like, oh, I think that pain will go away. And we haven't even comprehended the fact that when you do go to the hospital, you still got to pay the $25 in the parking ticket to the private company that owns the parking structure in the hospital, right? Like these are not leftist things that we're pushing for. These are very basic things that we're pushing for. I have some radical ideas that I do want to push, like a 99% estate tax on estates over $2 billion. That's a really good one. I want to double Social Security benefits and lower the retirement age to 50, right? Like these are pretty big ideas. I want to be ahead of where Western Europe is, right? Like the GDP that what I just said would put it around 12% of GDP instead of 5% where we are right now. So then we would be a scooch ahead of Germany. And I'd be like, that's where we should be aiming, a scooch ahead of Western European peer nations. But we're not even there. We're talking about stuff that is like not even getting us to where advanced democracies, advanced just means like mature democracies that have regular, and it's funny because we just had a coup attempt in this country. I mean, it's funny, but like that there's an orderly democratic transition of power and what we call the welfare state, but it just is that the public resources should protect the people who are the polity that creates the government, right? Like we're not arguing for too much. And the $4.4 trillion in the family and jobs plan is not too much. It's not even close to enough. If you actually look at how much the plutocrats have robbed from us over the past 40 years, this is a pittance. But the good news is that it's a structural change. So it changes the structure so that those plutocrats, it's harder for them to rob us going forward. And that's all we're trying to do, Jocelyn, you and I, and trying to get people to understand that through solidarity, we can keep the billionaires from actively killing us. We don't have to take it.
I love that you say that because I would like to bring up my favorite thing to point out every single show. I know we're saying a lot of dark things, okay, because reality is important to acknowledge when you have conversations about reality, but it's also important to realize that the best organizing moment we have is solidarity, is hope, is joy, because this is the fight for justice and the fight for a better world is the great love story that links all of us. Like when you think about taking, for some reason, I don't know what it is. I encounter this a lot, though, even in people my age. For some reason, when you talk about how much we should be paying for food and housing and healthcare, sometimes people will defensively be like, oh, I can afford it. I'll figure it out. Because we have this American propaganda that if you can't afford something, that's something shameful about you. So for me, like, look at the time, though. that this economy and this political reality steals from you. If you're having to work 3 jobs, that's time you're not spending with your children. And that's going to have an effect on the people they grow up to be. If you are single, even, and all your time is consumed with making money, you're not out potentially meeting the love of your life. We need to realize that there is a human cost to this. This isn't just about money. This isn't even just about our physical bodies. This is about who we are at a deep spiritual and psychological level. I am very excited to be alive at a time where we're talking about generational trauma, right? Like, what does it do to a people and a civilization when we have decades where people don't have time to spend with one another and build community and fall in love and form families? Like, what does that do? Not great things. And we gradually become alienated from the thing we're fighting for, which is why we can't let them do that to us. We have to stay linked to the people we love and the reasons that we want a better world to begin with. Hashtag solidarity.
And a policy that's in the Family and Jobs Plan that is so pertinent to this discussion is 12 weeks of paid family leave, which again, Ted Cruz's of the world are like, oh my God, 12 weeks of paid family leave. Oh, this is some communist plot. You're like, every peer nation of ours around the world recognizes that when a baby is born, the parents need time to take care of that newborn. It's important not only for the baby and the parents, but for society. You don't even have to believe in it for the good of the people. You could hate the people who you're giving paid family leave to, and still it's good for the society. We need structures like that to protect our community. And 12 weeks, if you go to Western Europe and you're like, we're fighting for 12 weeks of paid family leave. In the Nordic countries, they're like, what? We get a year. How would you, 12 weeks? That's not nearly long enough with a newborn. What do you get now? And you're like, none. It's 0. You get 0. You're expected to work the day after you give birth, right? If you're poor or poorer, because rich people get paid family leave. That's the thing. Ted Cruz can take the paid family leave. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, it's so funny because we've fetishized it. And now, the deep irony to me has always been, as someone who cares a lot about family, actually, who doesn't care a lot about family, but
Ted Cruz.
Lauren Boebert. You have these people, Republicans, who are out here saying we need to get back to traditional family values. We need to get back to a wife staying home with her children. You know what allowed that to happen? The ability for people to live off a single income, which does not exist. These people would love to have you believing that the reason women are flooding the workforce is because of some feminist plot to unman men. It has nothing to do with that. It's financial necessity. There are tons of families where I have no doubt the mother would love to spend more time at home with her kids or work part-time, but it's not economically feasible. It's just not.
Yeah, or the father or whoever, right?
Exactly.
One partner to stay home is just not feasible for many people. And so 12 weeks of paid family leave is in the Family and Jobs Plan. Just think of just that portion, if you pass that alone, would be a tremendous accomplishment. I think we've been working on it for a decade, if I'm not mistaken. It's literally since Social Security works, since we formed it, it's been a live issue, and we're going to try to get it across the finish line as one piece of this whole structure. So it costs some money up front, but think of the dividends it pays in terms of culture, community, and society, that people feel like our country has our back for building. The reason I want to bring my family into existence is because they all have a better life than me and a vision of the real dream that is not an American dream. It's a human dream. We tried to like claim it as ours and then warped it into this other thing that I talked about. The perverseness or the pathology of making us blame ourselves for structural violence against ourselves is one of the things that I like talking about the most on the show, because it's so, if we can get people to shift their thinking and recognize that it's being perpetrated on us. It's not your fault. It's not a mark of manliness or whatever to like, oh, I never take a vacation. I haven't taken a sick day in 10 years. And you're like, that's stupid. Don't be proud of that. Feel shame at that. Feel shame at the fact that you're proud of a dumb thing. Have you been sick in a decade? Yes. Then you should have taken a sick day. We are inundated with this sort of tough guy hustle mentality. And I'm using masculine terms for it, but it is propagated against women just as much as against men, right? For like how we have to tough it out in terms of our work. And it just is, it looks at people as disposable items, the same way that we have a sort of one and done consumerist culture out there where the things that we buy are cheap and discardable because it's way more profitable to build things cheaply that break, and then you have to buy another one. And that is also how the plutocrats look at the labor market. They want people to be like, I haven't taken a sick day in 10 years, and then they die of a heart attack. Well, and then you replace them with a younger, cheaper worker.
It's funny because if you don't care about things that sound soft to you, like, you know, mental health or whatever, okay, do you want to get shot up at school or a movie theater? Because every time this happens, a Republican comes out of the woodworks to say it's a mental health issue. Great, let's invest in mental health.
Yeah, let's put some money into it then.
When are we going to acknowledge that other people's psychological state absolutely affects us? And I don't mean even like our partners or our children or people that are close to us. When I was like 20 and working as a barista, some guy came in and was really rude to me. And I was like, I am so sorry for whatever has created you to be the way you are. And he started shouting at me in the middle of the coffee shop where I worked, which like I thought was hilarious at the time because I was a dick. But I always think about that as an example of like somebody having like a bunch of internal chaos comes out at everybody. Not just the people they love, not just the people who have to work with them, but the people they cut off in traffic, the people that they encounter in a public space. We need to realize that if we're creating this country of traumatized, freaked out, miserable people, that is bad for everybody, not just everybody. Yeah.
And I will just noting that it's 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. So we're the policy we're talking about is actually not going to fix all of what we're saying, but it at least is going to acknowledge that human beings we need to take care of ourselves and our families. We can't be part of a community just as like this. I rely on no one but myself. Like that's a myth. That's not a real thing. And like acknowledge that we've talked about this a lot. I just wish, and I'm not going to just bag on like Americans. I always say like we're hit with a ton of propaganda, but like, man, do I wish that people could have a mental consciousness flip to be like, they're exploiting you and me, and they are the rich people, and you're never going to be them. You're never going to be them. Jeff Bezos didn't build this. Elon Musk didn't build this. They're perpetrating it on you, and you should be mad about that. And you shouldn't lick the boot of the person who's kneeling on your neck. And this is not going to solve that, right? That I feel like we need more work of class consciousness, especially for people to understand that we're not divided this way. This is what the plutocrats love. This is a vertical division, right? Like, oh, you're over there and you're over there and you're over there. We're divided like this. And it's the vast majority of us, the 99% of us, doesn't, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or anything else, we're divided against them, the 1% who are perpetrating all of this on us. And we should strive to take away their weapons, their structural weapons of perpetrating violence on us in so many ways. And just to make the system a kinder system that encourages community, that encourages people working together. I want more public spaces, more people are in their little individual lives, and we create all the incentives so that you just basically go from home to work and back to home. I want people to walk around and see people, to say hi to people, to engage in a community. And that is very powerful, but it's not profitable for the plutocrats. And that's why they break it down and to extract more wealth from us.
I know we need to close out, but I want to say one thing about that
right.
specifically. I love you guys. It's such a good conversation. It's very possible too. And especially with community spaces, there are so many great writers who point this out. Christopher Lash is really eloquent on this one. The Great Good Place is a separate book about the importance of community spaces, bars, coffee shops, places where we just gather. And I really want to point out, as we exit quarantine slowly, that this is something we need to demand, because it's a psychological need that we have as a highly social, group-oriented species. We need more than just our intimate partners. We need more than just our 3 best friends. We need casual encounters with people we're affectionate with. We need the benign chaos of a show or a restaurant. Like, these are social needs that our brain craves because it's who we are at an animalistic level. And as we see that it is possible to work from home, I am very excited that we reimagine what life can look like. Let's invest in community spaces. Let's have a 4-day work week where the last day is for us to just be around other people. That is a society which isn't going to scream at the barista, and where people are happy and demand just wages and just create beautiful things. Do you want to?
And we can do it all by working together.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. Through solidarity. You might not have got my vertical versus horizontal here, but when we all here understand that we are together and violence is being perpetrated on us, then when we stand in solidarity, we remember there's a lot more of us than there are of them, and we can build a future that we want that works for us. So thanks so much for joining us on Solidarity Live, and looking forward to talking with you again next week.